Sadia Atene Homaheo. My name is Dr. Stephanie Beaver Guzman. Welcome all of my relations. I'm sharing with you just a little Natinakwe Mehanewe, the Hoopa language, of which I'm an enrolled member. And I'm brand new to MJC, and it's so amazing to see all of you in this room, whether this is because you're here for an extra credit assignment that I'm bribing you with, or if your class instructor has said, come on down, or if you're one of our many community members, or just students who are curious to learn from our Native authors and scholars and community members. So thank you so much for making time in your day, whether it is that voluntold or voluntary presence. It's really fantastic to see all of you here. If you can, take this moment to silence your phones. I actually don't even know where my phone is, and I hope it's on silent, but I'll get to that in a moment. So we have two amazing speakers to share with you today. Our plan is first to begin with a land acknowledgement and a welcome to this event and the co-hosting with our Sierra program. This is the second event in our Ethnic Studies speaker series, and you can see a new speaker every month almost for this whole semester. And this is a collaboration between our Sierra program, our Native Student Support Services on campus. Raise your hand if you go to that program at all. Have a representation? Yeah. It's an amazing program if you don't know about it. And so we're going to begin with a song, which is a traditional way to open Native events, and help bring some ceremony into our space, because our speakers are Native authors, Native scholars, Native community members, and so it's really a great way to help ground us and connect us in the space together. And then we'll begin our land acknowledgement and just a few basic remarks about the importance of hearing from Native voices themselves. I'd like to also introduce my colleague here, Jacob Pedrosa. He's the director of our Sierra program. So I'm going to start with a song, and then we'll share this land acknowledgement. If you are comfortable and able to, it's great to stand, just as a form of respect. If you are not able to, that's also okay.
Also, you guys remove your caps, please, city gentlemen. In our ways, if you have an eagle feather in your hat, you can leave it on when we do prayer, when we do song. But if you don't have an eagle feather in that hat, out of respect, we ask that you remove all your caps.
So I'm actually going to share a song that's often used intertribally. It is a Cherokee morning song that I learned from Awak Betty Cardoza as a way to honor openings and new beginnings. It's something that we sing at sunrise to welcome good blessings into our day. And because this is my first public event on this campus and my first time getting to connect with so many of you, I feel like that's really appropriate. Thank you so much. Welcome to be seated. As we gather at Modesto Junior College, we acknowledge that we are on the ancestral lands of the Yoka and Miwok peoples who have lived throughout the Central Valley, Sierra Nevada, and Sequoia foothills for generations. Let us recognize, respect, and honor the people who have called this area home from time immemorial, while also acknowledging their continued presence today. As the original stewards, these indigenous communities have cared for and respected this land, and their profound connection to this area continues to sustain their cultural heritage and identity. As we at Modesto Junior College strive for knowledge and understanding within this space, may we also strive to uphold their legacy through meaningful engagement and partnership. And in addition to a land acknowledgement that some individuals may think is performative only, I encourage you to learn and seek out ways to learn and identify your own knowledge gaps with the history of the indigenous peoples of these lands, of this region, and within California. I know many of you are in ethnic studies, and that's actually what we do in ethnic studies, is learn those counter narratives or those untold stories or those stories that are told in our communities, but usually not in our K through 12 history books. And so you being here today is one step and one action, one form of personal responsibility, even if it's for extra credit, to learn and take control of addressing that knowledge gap. And so it's with incredible respect and excitement to have you all here and welcoming our guests, Tommy Orange and Joey Williams. The order of our day, what you can expect, is that we have Tommy Orange until 12:15, and then we're going to have a small break, about a half hour, and then our second speaker, Joey Williams, will be speaking at 12:45. So that allows you to use the restroom, step away, get food, or if you have to leave for another class or obligation, then that's a perfect window for you. If you're looking for restrooms, you can go out this door and make a right, and the restrooms are over here. And if you could please help me welcome Tommy Orange. If you got here early, you will have been able to pick up one of the free books that he has written that we received with one of our local partners, the Modesto Teachers Association.
Stop. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Stephanie. I am Tommy Orange, enrolled member of the Cheyenne Arapaho Tribes of Oklahoma, born and raised in Oakland. So I wrote these two books, just finishing a third book. My dad is Cheyenne from Oklahoma. We are enrolled in the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes, but our tribes just kind of got stuck together in the federal recognition process. But we do know our family lineage, we're descendants of the Sand Creek Massacre, and that is some of the material that I dig into. But I started off how somebody ends up writing a book and having it like become an object and out in the world is kind of a crazy thing. So I'll try to talk a little bit about my journey, and then I'm going to read a little bit, and then we will, I'm going to open it up. I think anything that you can look up on YouTube is not interesting to attend live, so we'll try to have it be interactive and have you all ask questions that I can answer. I'm pretty much an open book, so anything you want to ask about the publishing process, about my background, I will be open and honest with you during the Q&A. But you got to hear me talk about myself for a little bit. So I was not a reader or a writer growing up in Oakland. I grew up on a block that was like everybody on my street was biracial. Oakland can be like that in certain neighborhoods. I went to public schools, and I liked, I tried out all the sports, and I really liked sports, and eventually landed on roller hockey. So this was the 90s. I know that sounds like a made-up sport, but it was real. Oakland had a professional team that played at the same place where the Warriors were playing, back when we had the Warriors. So, it seemed not crazy that I could pursue roller hockey in a serious way. And so that was where a lot of my energy went, probably saved me from getting into a lot of trouble. But I was in school, I was, below 2-point GPA in middle school, and then got kicked out of high school, just did not have the future in mind. My dad was a roadman in Native American church ceremonies, and my mom at the time raised us in an evangelical church in Oakland. So there's a lot of spiritual warfare that I grew up around. And the idea of the future and me becoming an adult seemed like, and this sounds crazy, but maybe not so crazy in a world that seems like it's ending right now. The church that I grew up in was very like, the world's gonna end and Jesus is gonna come back and all this kind of Christian stuff. So there was no conversations about college. After I graduated from high school, which is barely, I got into a community college and I just took general ed and ended up playing music and got into a technical / art school in the Bay Area that doesn't exist anymore. And thought I was gonna go into music somehow. But getting through college and having the plan that I'm gonna get into music somehow didn't turn out to turn into a job after college. And I ended up working at a used bookstore just to have a job, and then part-time at the Native American Health Center in Oakland. Ended up at the health center for the next 10 years after that, and so came to understand that there was a long-standing, thriving Native community in Oakland that I didn't grow up around. Like I said, on the block that I grew up on, it was, being biracial was normal, and it just sort of fit in with my friends that I grew up around. And being Cheyenne was something that people did in Oklahoma, which was the place we'd go visit with my dad on school breaks. So everybody that I thought was, related to me in that way lived in Oklahoma. And then I found this community in Oakland and did nonprofit work for about 10 years and ended up writing this book that is sort of about this whole world that is not really represented anywhere of Native people who belong to cities. So I did storytelling work in that community, worked with Native youth, and started writing this book while I was still working there. It took me about 6 years to finish the book, and at some point, it just came to me the idea that people in the book would all end up at a powwow and things would not go well there, and I didn't really know what that meant. But you were going to find out how everybody was connected and who they were, the people who ended up at the powwow. That was the structure of the book. And so the 6 years took 6 years because writing a novel is hard, writing a book is hard, and part of it is not knowing what you're writing and having to sit down and keep writing and keep getting material out, but then you revise and refine until it's something that people want to read. So that's all kind of, in 2014, I went to an MFA program in Santa Fe, New Mexico called the Institute of American Indian Arts. And I'd been writing the book for 3 years when I got into the program. But being in the program was part of what helped me get published, because being in an MFA means that you're in contact with teachers who have published books. That's sort of the requirement for teaching an MFA, is to have published a book. So I got in contact with people there, and through a series of hard work and luck and timing, it's sort of like the start of many success stories, and that's sort of what happened with my book. But the book largely sold on this prologue that I'm going to read from right now, which was an attempt to contextualize for Native people and non-Native people, the idea that Native people have been living in cities for a long time. As of 2005, 80% of Native people live in cities. And all you see in the way that it's taught in schools and the way we're depicted in the media is historical, related to pilgrims or reservations or related to cowboys. And it's really harmful for us to be modern day people to constantly be referred to only historically. And that's largely how they want it when a certain kind of American narrative talks about itself as having a once great or proud heritage. You can't have us committing genocide and displacing millions of people and creating governmental policies to erase people and their culture. That can't be part of the narrative. So it's easier when they teach Native subjects, when they talk about American history, to not have us be there. And so I wrote There, my first novel, as a way to resist an American narrative that I grew up around, that I knew existed, and that I wanted to, try to rewrite and have people rethink about what it means to be Native in, the 21st century. So I'm going to read just a little bit from the prologue, which a lot of people, after it got published, have called nonfiction. But I don't like writing nonfiction. It feels like homework to me every time I have to write nonfiction. I wrote this very much as it was written in the we as like a chorus of voices, because the book is filled with, there's 12 main characters that you follow, and the prologue is sort of supposed to be like a chorus of voices of Native people from the city. Getting us to cities was supposed to be the final necessary step in our assimilation, absorption, erasure, the completion of a 500-year-old genocidal campaign. But the city made us new, and we made it ours. We didn't get lost amid the sprawl of tall buildings, the stream of anonymous masses, the ceaseless din of traffic. We found one another, started up Indian centers, brought out our families and powwows, our dances, our songs, our beadwork. We bought and rented homes, slept on the streets, under freeways. We went to school, joined the armed forces, populated Indian bars in the Fruitvale in Oakland and in the Mission in San Francisco. We lived in boxcar villages in Richmond. We made art, and we made babies, and we made way for our people to go back and forth between reservation and city. We did not move to cities to die. The sidewalks and streets, the concrete absorbed our heaviness. The glass, metal, rubber, and wires, the speed, the hurtling masses, the city took us in. We were not urban Indians then. This was part of the Indian Relocation Act, which was part of the Indian Termination Policy, which was and is exactly what it sounds like. Make them look and act like us, become us, and so disappear. But it wasn't just like that. Plenty of us came by choice, by chance, to start over, to make money, or for a new experience. Some of us came to cities to escape the reservation. We stayed after fighting in the Second World War, after Vietnam too. We stayed because the city sounds like a war, and you can't leave a war once you've been. You can only keep it at bay, which is easier when you can see and hear it near you, that fast metal, that constant firing around you, cars up and down the streets and freeways like bullets. The quiet of the reservation, the side of the highway towns, rural communities, that kind of silence just makes the sound of a brain on fire that much more pronounced. Plenty of us are urban now, if not because we live in cities, then because we live on the internet, inside the high rise of multiple browser windows. They used to call us sidewalk Indians, called us citified, superficial, inauthentic, cultureless refugees, apples. An apple is red on the outside and white on the inside. But what we are is what our ancestors did, how they survived. We are the memories we don't remember, which live in us, which we feel, which make us sing and dance and pray the way we do, feelings for memories that flare and bloom unexpectedly in our lives, like blood through a blanket from a wound made by a bullet fired by a man shooting us in the back for our hair, for our heads, for a bounty, or just to get rid of us. When they first came for us with their bullets, we didn't stop moving, even though the bullets moved twice as fast as the sound of our screams. And even when their heat and speed broke our skin, shattered our bones, skulls, pierced our hearts, we kept on. Even when we saw the bullets send our bodies flailing through the air like flags, like the many flags and buildings that went up in place of everything we knew this land to be before. The bullets were premonitions, ghosts from dreams of a hard, fast future. The bullets moved on after moving through us, became the promise of what was to come, the speed and the killing, the hard, fast lines of borders and buildings. They took everything and ground it down to dust as fine as gunpowder. They fired their guns into the air in victory, and the strays flew out into the nothingness of histories written wrong and meant to be forgotten. Stray bullets and consequences are landing on our unsuspecting bodies even now. Urban Indians were the generation born in the city. We've been moving for a long time, but the land moves with you like memory. An urban Indian belongs to the city, and cities belong to the earth. Everything here is formed in relation to every other living and non-living thing from the earth, all our relations. The process that brings anything to its current form, chemical, synthetic, technological, or otherwise, doesn't make the product not a product of the living earth. Buildings, freeways, cars, are these not of the earth? Were they shipped in from Mars, the moon? Is it because they're processed, manufactured, or that we handle them, or were we so different? Were we at one time not something else entirely, Homo sapiens, single-celled organisms, space dust, unidentifiable pre-bang quantum theory? Cities form in the same way as galaxies. Urban Indians feel at home walking in the shadow of a downtown building. We came to know the downtown Oakland skyline better than we did any sacred mountain range. The redwoods in the Oakland hills better than any other deep wild forest. We know the sound of the freeway better than we do rivers. The howl of distant trains better than wolf howls. We know the smell of gas and freshly wet concrete and burned rubber better than we do the smell of cedar or sage or even fry bread, which isn't traditional, like reservations aren't traditional, but nothing is original. Everything comes from something that came before, which was once nothing. Everything is new and doomed. We ride buses, trains, and cars across, over, and under concrete plains. Being Indian has never been about returning to the land. The land is everywhere or nowhere. So that's the second half of the prologue to the book that ends up being kind of you learn early on that people are planning to rob the powwow that they're going to, and then other people are going to reconnect with the culture. I served, when I was at the Native American Health Center, I served on a powwow committee and came to understand that, because part of what a powwow is, it's a lot of things to a lot of people, but the centerpiece is a dance contest, and a lot of people travel what they call a powwow circuit. There's other names for it. You have families that have dancers, and they travel around the country to all these big powwows because there's prize money. So there's tons of money available at powwows to give to the dancers who win, and virtually no security. And because I'm maybe naturally criminally minded, I thought, like, okay, what if somebody robbed it? And so that was sort of where the plot came from. But it's not glorifying the robbery of the powwow, and things really don't go well for anybody involved. So the book went on to become a New York Times bestseller. What that meant for me was, because me and my family struggled with money for a long time, and so it became that I could write for a living and kind of go around doing different university work, talking about myself and the book, And then I decided to write something that was sort of an extension of this universe, but a totally different kind of book. So we go backwards in time, and we follow one of the family's family line. So this book starts with the Sand Creek Massacre. I grew up hearing a story from my dad about the Sand Creek Massacre and how we're descendants from it. His Cheyenne name comes from a boy who saved a younger boy that day. And there's a version of the story that I turned into fiction, but is very real, is how this book opens up. And then we follow this family line all the way up until right after something that happens at the end of this book. And we sort of see how one of the people who comes away from this powwow deals with something kind of awful that happens to him there. So it's about generational trauma, and it's about identity, and it's about historical natives that are in my family line, and sort of also what it's like to be a native person from Oakland living now. So I think we can open it up unless it's too early. I can keep talking, but I think it's more interesting to start engaging, probably. Like I said, I'm open to questions. If you guys don't have questions, I'll just keep reading from the book. But I think that's more boring.
So I'd like to invite the Native students in the IPAC Club, the Indigenous Peoples Alliance Club. If you are an officer or a member or affiliated with our CR program, you can come and kind of start off the Q&As before we open it up. If any of the students are interested in doing that, I'm going to be sitting up here with you. And you don't have to look at people, you can just look at Tommy. And if Jacob De La Rosa wanted to come up as well.
All right, Tom, I have a question for you. For those students out here who are interested in becoming a writer, what is the pathway that you took? And you kind of talked about you weren't really a reader or a writer. Was there journals that you kept or anything like that that created that pathway for you to go the avenue of writing that book?
Yeah, so since I don't think I finished a novel in high school or in middle school, but when I started working at the used bookstore that I referenced, I realized what fiction was and what you could do with story and with language, how you could address things that kind of bigger subjects. And I knew there was a lot that I wanted to kind of talk about with story and with language. And so pretty soon after I became a reader for the first time, I knew how far behind I was for somebody who wanted to become a writer. So I started writing all the time. And, you know, I would, got like a writing exercise book, tried all different kinds of forms of writing. I joined some writing groups. You know, with something like basketball, like Steph Curry's shot like 10 million three-pointers in order to be as good as he is. And like the concert pianist that plays the Rachmaninoff piece, like, you know, they've put in their 20,000 hours doing scales and practicing classical pieces. For a writer, it's a little bit harder to just sit down and like, what do you write? And a lot of times writing is mystified as like, you either have a story or you don't, or you belong to some special elite class that has a pathway through nepotism or something weird. And really, I think because I was first an athlete and then a musician, I understood that writing could be a discipline, that if you put in the work in the same way, it might translate to something. So I really, from 2005 to when I started writing this, I moved away for months at a time. I would quit my job, would save up and quit my job. And luckily the place that I worked kept welcoming me back. So I wrote and read as much as I could. And just being creative about what you write. Like if you love somebody's writing, one thing you can do is write out all of their sentences in their book and feel the rhythm of the way that they have voiced their thoughts in writing. Like I said, exercise books. The point is to sit down and write as much as you can, and writing is this mysterious thing where you don't know what you're going to say. And you start tapping your fingers, and all of a sudden you have something that you knew was inside that you didn't know that you had to say. That's if writers knew what they had in them without having to go through the mysterious process of typing it out and sort of putting yourself in the seat, you would just dictate it into a recording device and then they would print that. But that's not how it works. Not a lot of writers like to admit that they don't know what's going on and that they're not in control, but I think the best stuff that's in you is not reachable consciously, so you have to commit to the act of writing. And the more you access that channel, the more clear it gets. And then with revision, which is also part of the practice, continually looking at your own sentences and trying to figure out how to make them as clear and communicable as possible, and also as true to your own voice as you can. You know, to me, it's like any other discipline, but there's not a clear path to making it a discipline. Anybody knows how to go out and shoot the free throws and the three-pointers, practice scales and music. Writing, it's a little bit, you have to be a little bit more creative with how you're going to make it a discipline, but anybody can commit to it in that same way. There's just less of a clear path.
Since you're talking about the process and discipline of writing, I'm wondering about that experience of vulnerability when you go to share something you spent many hours creating, like sharing it with someone just to get feedback and get another set of eyes for revision, or when you decide to go try to publish something. Can you share more about what that's like, that vulnerability, and how you move through it?
Yeah, so it's a really scary thing to share the stuff that you sort of, descend into yourself to find, because you don't know if it's any good, you don't know if anybody will care, you don't know if it's going to be clear. So the scariest thing for me, a year into writing this book, I was working on at this nonprofit. My wife was the project director for a Native youth suicide prevention grant. And we did a bunch of stuff with the youth. We took them to Alcatraz and had elders come tell stories about the occupation there. That's one of the things that happens in the book, is you hear about this time when Native people took over Alcatraz Island, the prison island, for almost 2 years, kind of during the civil rights era. One of the last things we did with them, because we also had Yurok youth come down to Oakland, and we brought Oakland youth up to Yurok country up north and had them understand that, there were people who lived on rancherias or different types of native land, and their youth got to understand that there was a cultural experience to be had in Oakland. And so it was this cultural exchange. So one of the last things that we did was my wife put together an author symposium, and she was the only one who knew I was writing this book. And she made me read to the Oakland Native youth. And I was like, I'm not an author. But she knew what I was reading, because I would read to her as it came out. And so it was the scariest thing, because I cared about the Oakland Native youth. I wanted to reach them, but I was a year into trying to write something for the first time that felt real and serious. So a lot of the writing that I was doing in practice to try to get to starting a novel was like, I didn't know what I was doing. And this was the first time I was getting out stuff that mattered to me and was coming directly through my experience and trying to speak to their experience. And they were hard to impress. Like they were not always like amused by the ways we had them do activities. So that was one of the scariest moments, because it mattered so much. But after, and this was so impactful, I think it probably propelled me to keep working for the next 2 years. They all reacted like excitedly. One of the youth was crying. I read from the part of the prologue, and I was speaking to this urban experience that a lot of people don't feel has validity in the cultural conversation, because there's so much emphasis on reservation life and ceremonial life, and that all has its place, and it's all very real, and it's helped city people, natives in the city, to keep the connection. But we also have a story, and I think the youth felt that in what I had written. Part of it still exists in the prologue now, part of what I read that first year. But the vulnerability is very real. But that one stands out as more, that one's harder than like when I'm in my MFA and everybody's sharing their work and it's sort of like nerdy, like writers together. It's less scary. These kids weren't writers. They were gonna feel what was true in the writing or they weren't. And so that felt very real. Like even when I got to the trying to share it with the world and when it went out and I was on book tour, still not as scary to like share with old people from New England who heard about the book somehow. That wasn't, the scary part was that first thing.
Thank you, Tommy. I think we got some couple questions in the audience. I'm going to go over here to this young lady over here.
I just wanted to see if you could share, like, if you ever got writer's block and how you overcame it.
Yeah, I think writers probably face writer's block all the time, and some people I think they give into it because I think we've made writer's block into a thing, and we buy into it in ways that it's not helpful the way we talk about it. I think everybody knows that they feel self-doubt. Like, you could call it, I don't want to go to class block. You know, like I don't feel like going to school block. If we make it a thing and charge it and say like, oh, I can use this as something that happens to all students. It's a block. And so I don't really believe that it's real. I think doubt is real. And learning how to use doubt as a tool, like bring your doubt to how you revise and just accept it. Like, I'm not gonna feel that good about my writing on this particular day. I'll realize if I look at my writing, I'm gonna hate myself or I'm gonna hate the writing and I'm gonna do something bad to it. So I'll do something technical to it. Like, I'll word search how many times I use just, like in the whole document. And I abuse the word just. I abuse the word even. And you don't want to abuse any words. You want to have a balance. So make yourself an editorial assistant and take away all your executive privileges and do something weird like change this chapter into third person POV from first person POV. It's a very technical process to go through, and a lot of times halfway through doing that technical piece and making myself an editorial assistant, all of a sudden I'm writing a new sentence. And so I had to trick myself around, like, doubt will freeze you up. You're doing something hard and you're making yourself vulnerable and there's a part of you that doesn't want to bring things out of yourself. And that's where the block is charged from. Like, you don't want to say what you don't know that you want to say. There's some reason that your unconscious doesn't totally want you to have access to it because it's protecting itself. There's a lot of vulnerability inside that we have to put up guards for, you know, a brutal world. So it's tricky. It's a tricky area, and writer's block is real, but the block to be vulnerable is just everywhere, and the block to get up in the morning in a tough world. It all comes from the same place, and it's not having the belief and doubting too much, and I think just embracing that it's always going to be there and that there's nothing wrong with it, and that there's a part of you deep inside that's just trying to protect yourself from something.
So this is more of a personal question for me and anyone who can relate, but so I know that I have indigenous blood, but I do consider myself tribeless because my family, direct result of colonization, completely Americanized. But my question would be, what is your advice for people who are trying to reconnect with their culture, as well as having that indigenous identity?
Yeah, so this is, you know, really tricky territory, partly because colonization was so effective, partly because there are lots of weirdos who pretend to be native out there. And so that for people who really are, we catch the backlash. And part of it's, you know, this idea of who gets to be called Native is based on racist stereotypes. Like, we look a lot of different ways, from the top of the Americas to the bottom. That includes everybody. Everybody got colonized in the Americas. And we look a lot of different ways. We have different skin tones, we have different phenotypes, we have different heights. But the stereotype that gets perpetuated is some kind of like long-nosed Plains Indian, you know, probably wearing a certain kind of attire that everyone can recognize, we point at and be like, that person's Native. So, you know, the reconnection, there's a lot of different ways. There's finding indigenous communities and gatherings in your area and attending those. There's knowledge. You know, sometimes it feels like to be Native, you have to have the knowledge. And that was one of the things that got cut off. Cultural knowledge got cut off. So it's a tricky thing to like, well, if I have this amount of knowledge, then I can say with confidence that I'm Native enough. I think searching for that Native enough qualifier is kind of a lost cause. You know what's real. And trying to find the places in your life where that feeling blooms up in you as real. You just seek all of those out. It could be books, it could be knowledge, it could be ceremony, it could be attending community events, it could be finding the language of the tribe you're connected to. There's a lot of knowledge hidden inside the languages that were wiped out. So there's a lot of ways, but you have to know what rings true for yourself.
Good morning, Mr. Tommy. First off, I want to thank you for being here at MJC and representing. Thank you so much for speaking out for different cultures and tribes. My question is, as far as writing goes, as an author, I've heard about new AI technology that is able to basically take in multiple editors and just without any copyright laws, just by whatever laws they want to abide by, just take all their works and recreate it. What do you think about this? Is this something that's going to be helpful, useful, or is it really just hurting all of the original works that takes time and effort and just, you know, strips all the originality from a lot of people, not only editors, but actors and playwriters, music? What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a scary time to be a human, I think, right now, going into any field. AI, OpenAI, Anthropic, they both scraped both of my books to train their models. So I'm in like a lawsuit that I'm participating in, tons of authors. And like the settlement is like I might get $3,000 at some point for 12 years of my life that trained their models. So I feel pretty salty about it. And pretty afraid of where it can get to. Right now, I don't feel like what it can output as far as like original prose. If you prompt it to be like, write this thing in Shakespearean sonnet form to my girlfriend to give her on Valentine's, that's gonna be decent. But if I've asked it to write in the style of Tommy Orange, like write this piece for me, and it can't, there's a lot of, it can't do it. So in 2 years, I think the way that it's moving, the exponential growth, it's scary. I don't know if it's gonna get there. There's this gray area of like, I don't wanna go off on an AI rant, but you know, like there could be some kind of like inception or conception of a new kind of intelligence, and there could be ways that it replaces a lot of creatives. So I do feel the realness of it, and I'm trying to put out a lot of work right now. I'm putting out this third book at the end of this year. I'm selling a couple of books in a couple of months, and I don't have a real hopeful message about it. I'm worried.
We have one over here.
Hi, I know that you said that you wrote There as a collective, thinking like of everybody. I was just wondering, for some perspectives and for the characters, did you get inspiration from somebody in your life or or anyone?
I had inspiration from working in the community and understanding a certain perspective of a Native person from Oakland. It's very intertribal. A lot of people are multiple tribes. I did storytelling work, what's called digital storytelling. It used to sound cutting edge, now it sounds old-fashioned. That's how fast everything goes. But we would work with Native elders or different people from the community, and they would tell their stories. There was a 3-day process. They would tell whatever story they wanted to tell that would turn into like a 3-minute short film that we would teach them how to edit into a film. They would first tell it in a storytelling circle, and they were like real stories from their life. And it took a lot of courage and vulnerability for them to share that. And then we would help them turn it into 300-word scripts that we would record their voiceover and then help them gather images and go out into the world and kind of with phones just take footage to then turn into this short film. But in the process, I really came to respect people's personal details that make up their lives and the stories that they were telling. So it felt, early on, I was doing this work while I was thinking about this novel, and in the novel there's a documentary filmmaker who's collecting stories. But I was early on very careful about not taking anybody's story like that. Like just changing a name and a couple details, but basically that's Fred, who is Muskogee Creek, and the story that he told me in this vulnerable space, I'm just gonna take and say it's fiction. I was very careful not to do that. So there's nobody in here besides me and some of my family that is any kind of direct correlation. There's a composite influence from all of my years growing up and then being around the community that, I would ask myself as I was writing characters, could this person be from the community? Do they feel real to the experience? And that's from inspiration from having the experience myself. But I never took somebody directly like that.
Was it hard being accepted into the Native community after not being raised in it?
It wasn't, because it wasn't like I was, because my dad, his first language was Cheyenne, and he grew up speaking it in the house, and he was ceremonial, and he brought us to Oklahoma. I never felt like I was coming into the Native community in Oakland as an outsider Native person. It did take some time to understand what the community was like and what it meant to be a part of it, and where the gatherings were, and for people to trust me because I didn't. There's certain people that grew up in Oakland going to these events and parts of these organizations, but it was my job also, and I was there for, like I said, off and on for 10 years. But I wouldn't say that I felt like people were you're not one of us, because I very much was from Oakland and a Native person, so that was kind of an automatic thing.
I was wondering, you spoke about the religious beliefs between the two, your two parents. What were some of the similarities between the two, and what made you gravitate towards any other one, or did you adopt maybe a hybrid, or I just wanted to get your understanding on that.
Yeah, Christianity in all colonized communities, it's tricky because, so for example, in Native American church, my dad, part of it, the sacrament is peyote, and you're in a teepee, and there's a lot of Native traditions that have been made a hybrid with Christianity. So he'll pray to Jesus, and he had this experience when he was 19 where he fell off a bridge that didn't have any water under it and broke his neck. And he said, on the ground, before the ambulance came or whatever, he saw Jesus, and he had this experience where he asked him if he wanted to live or not. And so he sort of credits his surviving that on seeing a vision of Jesus. On top of the fact that, he grew up in a community that the Baptist church was a central part of. But he also went to Sweats and then also to NAC. So both parents saying Jesus, very different Jesuses. I wouldn't say that I made a hybrid. I kind of, because of what colonization and Christianity did together, I kind of stepped away from Christianity. I would never speak to anybody's personal relationship with their God or their religion. I just personally, that's not what I follow. I acknowledge the Creator and I pray, and so I have my own personal version of spirituality, but organized religion is not really my thing.
But you do, in a sense, you do believe in one creator.
Yeah.
So that would be one of the similarities.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, like I'm not an atheist, for sure.
And we have one here.
What's like your top books that you just would recommend to anyone besides your own?
My own would not be on the top. Louise Erdrich, all of her books, but if you had to start somewhere, The Roundhouse probably is a really good novel. When I read a lot of work in translation when I first started falling in love with writing. There's a Brazilian writer named Clarice Lispector that was a big influence on me. So she's like top in like what made me want to write. There's this weird guy named Robert Walzer. Stephen Graham Jones is a native author who's doing a lot of cool stuff. He does a lot of horror stuff, but he's prolific. He's got like 20 books out. He's somebody that I love. Top books. This one's a hard one. Those are my two favorite native writers. I didn't read a lot of classics, but some older writers are like Kafka and Borges are worth looking at because they're doing cool, weird stuff. That's just who comes to mind right now. If I looked at my phone, I have an ongoing note thing to answer this question, but I would stop right there.
And we have a question in the back.
Clarice Lispector?
Okay, it looks like I get to be next. Back here, way back here, Tony. By the way, FYI, I'm the first person who ever bought your book. They're there in the county where I live, just so you know. And this woman here has had a huge impact in Tuolumne County in terms of the awareness, love, and presence of the Native people that live in Tuolumne County. Yeah, you're so lucky to have her in JC. And on that note, I write. Most recently, I've been working on a museum piece that is about my own tribe, the Wyandotte people of Oklahoma. And I want to eventually move in the direction of historical fiction because that's one of my favorite medium of reading. And I struggle with how to take historical events and pull back a little bit from the actual obsession with the accuracy and then lean into the characters and lean into the greater meaning, the greater cause for choosing to work in that kind of medium. So what if you have any insight about that?
Yeah, thank you for getting me the first in the county. I should say I was born and raised in Oakland, but I spent 7 years in the mountains. My wife grew up in Copperopolis, but she went to high school in Stockton, and so we came down Modesto and Stockton all the time during the 7 years that I was living up in the mountains. And actually, that's how we met Stephanie, who brought me here. Thank you, Stephanie. That was through a connection with my wife that I'm actually not sure about. Not to make it sound shaky. So with Wandering Stars, I kind of didn't want to write historic fiction because of how overdone I felt, native depiction was. But I really felt drawn to talking about my family line, the Sand Creek Massacre descendants. And so for me, the way in, and to try to think about the reader's way in, because there's tons of history that people could read and they don't, but people do like reading new ways of talking about old stories. And the way in for me is to make it personal and to bring interiority. The history doesn't do interiority very well. You might have the papers of somebody, their journals. Those may or may not be actually honest journals. Sometimes, like if you look at Columbus's journals, they don't paint a good picture of anything. It's kind of, he's an absolute psychopath. He went to back in chains with his brother, and we're still like talking about building statues for him. Anyway, getting to the personal and the interior part through thinking about what it would have been like, just as a human, what would it have been like to go through this historical experience? You can imagine your way in, and then for the reader, make that historic event personal. That will make them care about the event more than the time that it happened, the number of people who died, the weather that day. What would it have been like? And that's what fiction does, is like it imagines what would that be like. And we all, as humans, can do that. This is part of why we love watching movies and reading books, because we get to step into another human's experience and think about and feel about what it would be like. So that would be my advice, is to give the reader a way in through the personal.
I think we have time for 2 more questions.
I come from a long line of generational trauma and addiction. I wanted to know if you've had firsthand experience with that, and if you have, how has it affected your psyche, and has it transformed through your writing or affected your writing in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Have you read either of the books?
I have not.
Okay, so there's a lot of addiction in both, because there's been a lot of addiction problems in my family. So, anybody who feels historical trauma in a personal way in their lives understands that the addiction that a lot of our loved ones suffer from has a direct correlation to a lot of the systemic violence and the colonial violence that has happened in our family lines, and the way that we cope with the sadness that comes with the loss of language, the loss of culture, the loss of land, things just going in kind of a not good way in our family lines. That addiction is a way that we cope. Alcoholism sometimes, is put on Native people or put on Mexicans or put on, it's put on a lot of people as if it's their weakness because they don't want to point to the cause. Alcohol is what's available like legally at a store, and they put in liquor stores in certain neighborhoods on purpose because they know people are hurting and will go to that thing to help the hurting. They're not putting in healing centers with counselors. They could do that. So I write about addiction. I've dealt with it personally over many years. I've struggled, and so writing has been a way through for me, and it's a constant struggle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Tommy. What responsibility you feel you have in your stories?
Can you raise your hand? Oh, thank you.
What responsibility you feel you have in your stories with communities who might feel misunderstood or invisible?
Responsibility for, in the sense that I want to represent the community I'm writing about in an accurate way. That's
other communities like Mexican, Indian.
Yeah, in these 2 books, I'm writing about the Cheyenne Arapaho experience and kind of the biracial experience, and a lot of people from Oakland, and thinking about how close or distant the connection they have. I I wouldn't say I feel a sense of responsibility to writing for other people and their communities, just because I feel that's where somebody else should write that story. There is like, you know, the sense of having the microphone, and if these people don't have a voice, shouldn't you on the microphone use your time or space to do that? And so, you know, I don't think in writing books, that's not the place for me. I'm always about kind of trying to uplift all marginalized voices in different ways, but for an author, like for what I do, I don't have a big public persona, I'm not on social media, so I'm not out there voicing my opinion, but I do try to, I have students, I've been teaching for 7 years, and I try to promote other people's books, people from marginalized groups. I just wrote a review about an Afghan group, and a story that came out of a writer who grew up from that experience. And it went out in New York Times as a review. I read a lot of blurbs. So in the ways that I can, I try to like uplift people, but I wouldn't feel right speaking on behalf of, you know, Mexican people I think in the way that you mean, if that makes sense.
All right, thank you so much, Tommy, for your time. I know that some of you have to go to another class, but for those of you who will be able to come back, we have our next speaker at 12:45. And for those who are staying for our next speaker, we do have pizza in the hallway out here, but we're asking for our elders, our guests, our tribal community guests, to be able to eat first. And please, because there's so many of us, we want to make sure that everybody gets some. So can you just start out with one piece first, in hopes that we have enough for everyone. There are drinks, and I invite you to please eat outside because this room does not allow food.